Just Baseball Show on Friday, July 12th, as always presented by BetMGM. We have been absolutely cooking editorially at justbaseball.com, and the man behind it, or at least one of them behind it, is Ryan Finkelstein, the head honcho, the managing editor at justbaseball.com, also the host of Locked On Mets. We are going to talk about the Mets vibes and a lot of paid for dinners and hotel ballrooms. We're going to get into that a little bit. Fink wrote an excellent story on what can put the Baltimore Orioles over the top. So I do want to start with that. I also saw two headlines that really piqued my interest. So we can spend some time on that. And then we wrap with games of the weekend. Fink, welcome back. This is the first Just Baseball show this year, right? You probably
Think
did like
so.
10 or something last year.
I might have, yeah. I don't know if it was quite 10, but definitely my first one of the year. Excited to be back on talking about the Orioles and a piece that I probably spent way too much time on. I apologize to anyone that had to read 4,000 words, but I thought that they have so many options at their disposal. I just wanted to break down what they can do, which is absolutely anything they want to at this deadline.
Honestly, anything they want. And they don't need to move Holiday. They don't need to move Mayo. They may need to move Basayo depending on what they want to do, but we'll get into that here in a moment. Before that, I got to tell you about an awesome opportunity that you guys have on Sunday and Monday. We are super excited to be hosting our first ever live baseball collectibles charity auction, which is hosted exclusively on eBay Live during Major League All-Star Weekend 2024. So this weekend, it's a 2-day event. Sunday the 14th, Monday the 15th, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central, from Play Ball Sports Cards and Memorabilia in Arlington, which is a couple-minute drive away from Globe Life Field and All-Star Fan Fest, about a half-hour walk, but it's streaming live on the eBay app. The auction is streamed exclusively on eBay Live and will be benefiting various charities like Conines Clubhouse, the Baseball Island Foundation, and Pitch In for baseball and softball. Auctioned items include cards, memorabilia, other collectibles from brands like CGC Cards, Onyx Authenticated, and more. And we're fired up that Homage is going to be the official apparel partner for Just Baseball at the 2024 All-Star Game. I've seen the swag bag. It's crazy. Our crew is going to be watching Homage's, or going to be rocking Homage's new 2024 All-Star Game shirts and the Topps MLB collection on the stream. And they've generously donated some awesome MLB apparel bundles for the charity auction. So fans around the country can tune in exclusively online on the eBay app. So we'd love to interact with you in there. Again, July 14 and 15, 4 p.m. Eastern in Arlington at Play Ball Sports Cards and Memorabilia, and exclusively on eBay Live. We cannot wait to see you there. I won't see Francisco Lindor there, and that probably really irks you. I was thinking about actually theming this show just teams in orange. Like I was going to figure out something to talk about with the Giants, and it would be O's, Mets, Giants. But before we get into the O's trade piece, I kind of want to give you the floor on Francisco Lindor not being an all-star again, because it has to be driving you up a wall.
It's funny. It's as much as it's Lindor, the way that process broke out. I at least was able to look at CJ Abrams' offensive numbers, the fact that Turner got voted in, Elly De La Cruz should be there, and I was able to come to a point where, even though it's ridiculous that Francisco Lindor got snubbed again, and last year, for those of you who don't remember, Geraldo Perdomo made the All-Star team over Lindor, and it wasn't a situation where it was, hey, let's bring the one Diamondbacks. Corbin Carroll started the game, so they didn't have to do that. Lindor gets snubbed by the end of the season. He's 3 wins better than Perdomo when it comes to WAR, but at least when it came to shortstop, Abrams, Elly, Trey Turner, I kind of could get it. Brandon Nimmo being snubbed too is the more glaring one, and Pete Alonso being in just doesn't make sense. And I even wrote an article about this week because I was just so confused by it. Because it just, to me, Pete Alonso over Christian Walker. If you look at the stats, Christian Walker has him in every single one.
Yeah.
And I don't get exactly why they went that way, other than the most obvious answer, which is the home run derby. They wanted Pete in the home run derby. And so by product of doing that, you get Christian Walker snubbed, you get Brandon Nimmo snubbed, and you get Francisco Lindor snubbed. And Alonso gets whatever it is, his fourth straight All-Star appearance.
You know what you did this week is you cemented your J card. Like you renewed your J card subscription, I will say. Like you are a journalist by saying, "Hey, Pete Alonso shouldn't be an all-star." And that was huge. And I commend you for that.
Well, you know what? You got to be honest with yourself. Like, if you're going to talk about the snubs on your team and there's a glaring one in the league and your guy benefited from it, you still got to own it. And look, there is no world where Pete Alonso's had a better season than Christian Walker. It's just that simple. And yeah, Lindor and Nimmo both should be all-stars. I'm waiting to see some guys get hurt here to pull themselves out of the game so those wrongs could be righted. But it is what it is. Honestly, if it gives those two guys a chip on their shoulder, maybe it works out for the Mets.
So I'm changing the rundown a little bit. I do want to, kind of go into that with the Mets too, because Nimmo and Lindor are the two biggest money guys on a team that has some big money guys on it. But big money is relative, I think. And when you walk into the Mets clubhouse, there are two guys that are set, and it's Lindor and Brandon Nimmo. And I will ask the vibes question in a moment, but I saw the report. I don't know who initially did the reporting, but Nimmo and Lindor have been picking up apparently team dinners when they're on the road, which, is like nice. I thought kind of unnecessary. Typically, the team just fronts like a team dinner, but there are a lot of meals that are being accounted for by Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo. Apparently, they'll like rent out a ballroom in the hotel or something, and they'll cater something. And allegedly, those team dinners have 100% attendance, which
Yeah.
never happens ever in any sport on any road trip. Are you shocked to hear this about this team and you just watched, a part-time shortstop perform his pop hit on field last weekend? Like it just seems like this energy is so ridiculously good for the New York Mets.
I think it shows the leadership of those two guys. And everyone wants to talk about Grimace or OMG or all these other side stories that
Right.
follow the Mets, and they're fun. But if you really want to know what happened, there was a players only meeting after Jorge Lopez chucked his glove into the stands against the Dodgers at the end of May. And since then, there has been a tangible difference in the way these guys have interacted that you can just see it. It's all pulling together. And in that meeting, they held each other accountable, and basically Lindor led that entire process, essentially saying, "Look yourself in the mirror, and if you can feel good about your own process going to the ballpark, there's nothing else to worry about. So just focus on you and everyone being accountable for themselves. Everything will work out." Since then, the Mets have been playing much better baseball. I think this is the season where Francisco Lindor has really become that leader for the New York Mets. It goes back to the offseason. We saw multiple times where it was Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos working with Lindor in the offseason on their defense. Both those guys much improved this year. Having that meeting in the end of a really brutal stretch. And then also, I talk about it on my show all the time. After that meeting, he stood in front of the New York media for 11 minutes, answered every single question, just did exactly what you need to as a star player in New York. And now you're also hearing these other stories about team dinners and everything else. It does feel like Nimmo and Lindor, as the two players that are under contracts through the decade,
Yeah.
have really assumed that leadership. They know that they're the guys there, and if they want to win, they got to drive it, and they're doing that right now.
And what I love is like it's okay if it takes time for Lindor to
Yeah.
blossom into a leader. And I'm sure you have looked at Manny Machado in San Diego, and I'm sure that you have kind of drawn those parallels where they are such a scintillating young talent that like has shown signs of immaturity. They get big money, they show some signs of immaturity, and then they blossom into a leader. And I know San Diego, like they love Manny Machado now and they view him as a leader. And there was some shit that hit the fan in San Diego that kind of warranted that and pushed him closer to that, maybe quicker than he would have naturally gotten there. But Lindor, like, it's okay if it takes time. He's the leader now. And that has to be like so cool to actually see blossom in real time. When do you feel like that progression to leader started? Was it end of last year or has it really all just been this season?
I think it's been a growing process for 4 years now, because 2021, he's thrown into the fire going from Cleveland, where he's beloved, to New York. And he said it this year. He said, in Cleveland, I could go 0 for 42 before I start to hear it. Here, I go 0 for 7 and I
Right.
hear it. So it was a big difference for him. He went through a lot that year. 2022, I'm sure it started in some ways, but you have to think about who was on that team. You had Max Scherzer, who was able to really be that leader for the club. I think after everything that happened last year and seeing a season go as sideways as it did, I think there was a renewed focus on, if the Mets are going to be successful, I got to take charge. And I think it did start this offseason. Like I said, taking Vientos and Beatty under his wing, everything else he did to set himself up to have a great year. And yeah, he leads by example, but I think he's been more vocal when he needs to this year. And lately, it's working out for the Mets.
So Lindor and Nimmo, assuming those leadership responsibilities, the team meeting after the Jorge Lopez incident, I think that there is another just like presence of a guy that is playing a huge role in this, and that's Francisco Alvarez. And I know that Grimace and Alvarez's return happened at a very similar time. Um, would you trade Alvarez for any other catcher in baseball right now? Considering where he's at, it just seems like he is the unsung hero of the New York Mets, and he has quickly become the fan favorite. And obviously, he's one of the best young catchers in all of baseball. Like, I think you pose that question to people outside of New York, and you say, "Oh yeah, if I can go Francisco Alvarez for Will Smith, I'd do it. If I can go Francisco Alvarez for Adley Rutschman, I'd do it." Adley aside, because Adley is just kind of in a league of his own when it comes to that. Are you moving Francisco Alvarez for anybody?
Of course not. Especially because it's the homegrown kid. It's someone that you've been watching since he was a teenager. And I remember when he was coming up at one point, I noticed, like I had an image of him for one of my shows, and I like zoom in on his neck. I'm like, does this dude have the best tattooed on his neck? And he does. And he views himself as the best. He works his ass off. And I think the impact that he's had, for one, he's been on fire offensively. But if you look at the splits on two left-handers in particular, you look at Jose Quintana and Shamanaya. Their ERA without Alvarez behind the plate this year is like north of 5, and with him it's sub 2. It's those two in particular that have been so much better over this past month, and it's helped this rotation in a huge way. Alvarez is such a leader behind the plate. He's obviously great at pitch framing, and controlling the running game is coming along, but it's the leadership that you're seeing at 22 years old that's pretty unbelievable for a kid that is still just getting started. And I think the sky's the limit. I've said that he can be the best catcher in baseball. I truly believe that. I believe he can be better than Adley Rutschman in 2 years because the power is legit too.
Nobody's supposed to be a leader at 22 years old, but that's kind of what we're looking at with this guy. And he's not far removed from being a number one prospect in all of baseball, or at least a consensus, top five, top 10 prospect in all of baseball. Um, I love watching him, and there's something about like his just natural gravitational pull. Like it makes me want to watch him. He pulls me in. He radiates energy that in turn brings me in, and I don't know how the physics work on that. Last Mets question before we get to the Orioles article that you wrote, which was excellent, and it is linked in the episode description. These are the best Mets vibes since when?
You want to be dramatic, like it's been forever.
Yeah. Right.
2022,
Okay.
2022, they won 100 games. So I can't say that the vibes weren't great that year because there was a lot of stretches where they were very good. Um,
Is this
but
team
yeah,
more likable?
than the 2022 Mets?
Yeah.
I think so. I think there's something to be said about going through the peaks and valleys that just makes the team a little more exciting. I've always said with my show, I do a daily podcast. I either want them to be horrible or great
Yeah.
because stuck in the middle is the worst. And the funny thing is, I think 2 days ago they were exactly at 45 and 45
It
with
doesn't
a
feel like it.
with
Yeah.
a run differential of 0, but it's been like let's play 10 games over, 10 games under, and go back and forth. It's been a lot of fun this season. And one last player to note before we switch over, Mark Vientos has been unbelievable for this
Uh-huh.
team. I always believed in the bat. I've been saying he had the potential to be a 30 or 40 home run guy whenever he actually got, big league playing time. But to be a passable defender at third base has been insane. And he just continues to prove that he's the guy there. So Brett Beatty going to be buried for a little bit because Mark Vientos isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
So can I tell you, I kind of Spider-Man meme Vientos and Jose Miranda in Minnesota because they were guys with defensive questions, corner infielders, right-handed hitting mashers in the minor leagues, and they were going to be the shit in 2022. And then they went through some trials and tribulations. And then they went through some trials and tribulations in 23. And 24, I start to forget about you. And then boom, they're back. And Vientos has been balling. Jose Miranda, if you haven't heard, 12 consecutive ABs with a base hit. Those guys to me are like the same exact trajectory, a very similar player, and it's a really good player. And development progression is not linear. Like you
Yeah.
see it take all forms. And sometimes a catcher is a leader at 22 years old. And sometimes it takes, 25, 26-year-old Vientos a couple years and a couple tries in the big leagues to stick around. I mean, look at Kelnick, man. Top 10 prospect in baseball. Change of scenery. I don't think the book is closed on Adele yet. Like I think it's close to being closed, but there's so much talent in some of these guys. Sometimes it's going to take a couple years and a couple stints of failure to figure it out. So I love that you shout out Vientos. Beatty. All right, last Mets question. Where are you at on Beatty right now? Because obviously, like he's going back to Syracuse and he's raking. Um, you can't run into that if you're Brett Baty. Like you need to rake up there. You can't be the Syracuse raker and then be underperforming in New York. Like I'm watching kind of the same thing unfold with Henry Davis here in Pittsburgh. It's like he's balling in AAA, okay, but when he gets back up to the big leagues, like how's it going to go? How do you feel like it goes next for Beatty? And like when does the next shot come?
It's really tough because these are guys that you get them back to AAA and they're just too good for AAA, but they need to go through their struggles in the big leagues. They got to figure it out. But right now, there's just no room for Brett Beatty. I'm in a tough spot because for the first time ever, I actually have considered like, is Brett Beatty the trade chip that the Mets use at this deadline?
Wow.
Because I think he still holds some value, and maybe you want to take advantage before all the value goes away if he can never figure it out at the big league level. To me, though, the progression I saw defensively at third base this year, I mean, he was a legitimate above average defensive third baseman. He was great over there. I just believe that there's still a good third baseman there at some point. And I think with the questions on Pete Alonso, even though I still believe Pete Alonso is going to resign this offseason, there's a world where you just slide Vientos to first, and next year Brett Beatty's your third baseman. You give him 2025 to figure it out. So I think they're in a point where they're probably just in wait and see mode, and hopefully he can get whatever development he can out of being in AAA this year and sort of being stuck. They're trying him at second base a little bit to potentially, I think, come up for the stretch run this year and play a role off the bench, maybe get a start at second base here and there. But yeah, Vientos has grabbed his job, and so he's just sort of stuck in purgatory for now. But I think it's too soon to give up on him. I try to do the math on the trades. I can't think of a trade that would make sense for them. Like if the Mets traded Brett Beatty for Chad Green, like
No.
Chad Green would be. I would love Chad Green in this
Yeah,
bullpen,
but
but
you're
you can't
pissed
do
that you
that.
gave up Beatty for that,
No,
right?
you can't do it. So I don't think there is a fit to deal him. I think it's just we'll see what happens in 25, or maybe he does something special down the stretch. But I unless Vientos slows significantly, he probably just has to wait till next year.
You gave me the perfect word for the transition. Speaking of guys that are stuck, Ryan Finkelstein put together an excellent article on justbaseball.com. Again, the link is in the episode description with 3 trades that could really put the Baltimore Orioles over the top when it comes to being the best team in the American League. I think, as constructed, they are the best team in the American League.
Yeah.
Even with Bradish out, even with Means out, even with Felix Bautista out, I think that they are the best team in the American League. They have a lot of guys that are surplus in Norfolk. They have a lot of guys that are surplus in Bowie and Aberdeen. And man, like they have probably still to this point the best farm system in baseball. If it's not the best, if the Cubs have somehow bunny hopped them, if the White Sox bunny hop them at the deadline, they're still a top 3 farm system in all of baseball. They have the number 1 prospect in the game, or at least for us, the number 3 prospect, but by some outlets, the number 1 prospect in the game in Jackson Holiday. They have Kobe Mayo, who is a top 10 prospect in baseball. They have Samuel Basayo, who is a top 15 prospect in baseball. And they have so much to work with. Kyle Stowers just became the Norfolk Tide's all-time leader in career home runs. That guy should never top a AAA leaderboard. He's too good for that. Mayo's too good for triple. I think Chase McDermott's major league debut is overdue. And then you go to double A, man, and like you just see a Bright, a Beavers, a Fabian. There's so much going on. And you identified 3 trades that are not necessarily break the bank. One of them is, and we can, kind of get that one out of the way. You think a closer is like perfect for them at the deadline.
I think they're the one team in baseball that can afford the luxury of Mason Miller. And that was sort of the big genesis of everything I was getting to throughout the article was building up to a Mason Miller trade. And to me, yeah, you could say on the surface, why trade as much as they're going to have to get Mason Miller when they could just pay a quarter of that, maybe even less for Tanner Scott and roll this year. That's a fair point. But to me, it's the fact that you would not only just get Mason Miller for this playoff run, it's five more after it. And I just imagine I compared it in the article to when the Guardians got Andrew Miller in 2016, where you just have a guy that you could throw out there because they have Kimbrel if they wanted to. They could pitch Mason Miller in the sixth inning of a playoff game when they're going up against, if it is the Yankees, Judge and Soto with runners on, and here comes Mason Miller to put out that fire. I just think it would mean so much to this team, and they're the one team in baseball that I think can do it.
It's funny. That is like, and it feels niche, but it's really not, especially like being a native Chicagoan like me. I was rooting for the Cubs to win the World Series in 16. I will stand by, like, I think that Andrew Miller going to Cleveland was one of the better deadline acquisitions of our lifetime because
Yeah.
they traded for him, and Terry Francona, being the excellent all-time Hall of Fame caliber manager that he is, said, "Hey man, like if you get the ninth, you get the ninth, but Brian Shaw is ready for the ninth. So if we run into leverage in the sixth in the postseason, like if we're in the ALDS and we've got a shit fifth inning, you're going to get us out of the fifth inning." That was like ultimate maturity. And I think Mason Miller could be the best fireman in baseball. And like I
Yeah.
love the fireman, man. I know the White Sox tried to do that in 21. They tried to do that with what was it, Kimbrel and Hendricks. I think Hendricks was a fireman, but it just didn't really work for them.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look, you look at Andrew Miller in the ALCS. He was the ALCS MVP that year. 7 2/3 scoreless, 14 strikeouts, no walks. I mean, and you just remember every single big moment Francona was able to get Andrew Miller into the game. And I just feel like Mason Miller, imagine next year, even Mason Miller and Felix Batista, like really? Like they just would have an incredible way to shorten games. To me, it would be such an awesome move. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but again, the point of the article is to show you that anything is possible. You might believe that they should go out and get Garrett Crochet.
Yeah.
They can do that if they want to. Personally, I think that Garrett Crochet is a great luxury, but I would not want to bet on Crochet to pitch deep into October this year and give up that level of capital to get him. So that was another part of the article for me.
He is, I don't want to say terrifying because he's an all-star and like he's shown no signs of slowing down, but he's kind of a scary one. I'll level down from the word terrifying. He's a scary trade candidate because he's already at his career high in innings and like he's blowing by it. And he says he feels fine. Okay, great. Saying you feel fine and like pitching on October 20th is a totally different beast. So I'm totally with you. You ID'd a couple of starters, but in terms of relievers not named Mason Miller, and they can do it. And I know that you put together a deal that did not include Holiday and did not include May. I feel like those are the two untouchables. I feel like Basayo is very close to being untouchable for them, but I mean, Connor Norby is surplus at this point. Like Judd Fabian is probably surplus at this point. Um, they can absolutely, by sheer quantity, put together a deal to force Oakland's hand on Mason Miller. But other relievers you think could make sense for Baltimore that may not even be listed in the article outside of Miller. I know you mentioned Tanner Scott. Like, would Kyle Finnegan have to move his family? Would Hunter Harvey have to move his family? Floro? But does that move the needle? Does that push the Orioles closer to World Series contenders than they are right now?
I don't think so. Carlos Estevez is, going to be on the market. I don't know that is why Miller is so intriguing to me because it gives you that real lights out, sexy name to put into the
Right.
bullpen. But again, a Tanner Scott could be just fine. He's definitely a really solid reliever that can close games in a pinch for sure. But it lacks a little bit of that pizzazz maybe that the Miller acquisition would give them.
One of the other trades that you pitched was giving a young outfield some more runway. And I know that they run into a numbers crunch, and Cedric Mullins is playing a lot, and he's been very underwhelming offensively, and the defense is not carrying the war to the level that it has recently. And we're what? We're 3 years removed from that 30-30 season at this
Yeah,
point.
2021. Yeah.
21 was it? Yeah, it's crazy that it was that long ago. But I mean, like, he hasn't been that offensive threat since 2021. So you see a place for Mullins to kind of exit the equation, and that would stink because he's like the last bad Oriole left. Means is there as well. But Mancini, like when Mancini got traded to Houston, it was almost like a changing of the guard in Baltimore. And if Mullins and Means are out of the equation after this year, you're like, wow, those bad Oriole teams are just gone at this point, huh? So I know there's some sentimental value to Cedric Mullins being a Baltimore Oriole, but you think he could make sense on another team, and in turn that could kind of bolster their pitching stable waiting in AAA.
Yeah, to me, I look at just overall the sort of surplus on the big league roster, the kind of logjam, and I identified it was really four guys that I was looking at. It was Jorge Mateo, Raymond Urias, and then Cedric Mullins and Austin Hayes. And it was like, all right, which of these guys can you clear out
Yeah.
that would have value? And I feel like all of them, to some respect, would have value at this deadline because there's not a lot of position players available. I think Mullins is the perfect combination of clear a guy out to give probably a better player a chance at the big league level. And then also, I think there'd be value there because how many center fielders are on the market this year? I think that Mullins is a guy that teams can talk themselves into. Like, okay, yeah, it was a couple years ago, but when you're a GM at the deadline and you're just looking for something, if you can think, all right, and the Cardinals were the team that I mocked here, they've gotten the worst production from center field from any team in baseball this year. And Michael Ciani's been great defensively, but hasn't hit a lick.
He's not a big league hitter. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mullins sliding in there, at least he gives you speed. There is a chance of the power. And I think also a chip on your shoulder getting traded from the best team in baseball to another situation that's not a horrible one, a chance
No.
to win still. I think it would make a lot of sense. And the reason why I chose him over Austin Hayes is because Hayes gives you a bat against left-handed pitching. He actually does something that I think on a contender is a definable trait that can carry him, even if it's in a more limited role. So that's why I went Mullins. But you can make a case for trading any of those guys. I saw some stuff yesterday about Mayo certainly playing some first base
Yeah.
in the minor leagues. So it was like, oh, is Mountcastle or O'Hearn available? Like they can do anything that they want to
I
with those
think
guys.
that's an off-season thing.
I
Like
think
for
so too.
me, if I was sitting in Mike Elias's chair, I would say I'm not touching that first base platoon right now because
It's
it's been
working.
so good. Yeah, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that thing is so far from broke, it's insane. But I could absolutely see an outfield reshuffling. Do me a favor and close your eyes and picture Jorge Mateo in an LA Dodgers jersey. I pitched that a couple weeks ago.
I
he
can see it.
feel he fits a lot of needs that the Dodgers have on the infield right now. I just saw that ball get under Miguel Rojas yesterday to bring in a run in Philly. Um, that's like the one that I pitched, I think like 3 weeks ago, just on a whim, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to stand by that one, and that clears up more space, and you could give Norby some run, but I don't know. Mateo's a tough one because you want to keep that speed and defense on your roster, even if it's on
Yeah.
your bench. He's the best version of the speed and defense guy that we have in a major league infield. And I think that is incredibly valuable. So I think that you picked the right guy of that assortment of four. Ramon Urias would probably be the right guy, but there's just not the value of a Cedric Mullins.
Yeah, I honestly, I said like I was making the case to even DFA him. Honestly, just because I think they should give Mayo some run here. And the reason why also I think Mateo and Mullins were the two that were similar to me in that I felt like they had value. Like I think Mateo, if you put him out there, he has value, but how much value does he have? And also, I feel like if Mayo comes up and he doesn't hit, well then all right, you can go back to Mateo and slide Westbrook back over to third. So to me, it made sense to keep him, but again, it's just the limitless possibilities that they have. Where even if they wanted to, they could keep all these guys and just trade prospects. But when we were looking at the Mason Miller trade, and I was asking you and Arm for some packages for it, one of the things that Arm said was, the A's like volume in those trades to be able to even reroute a prospect that you get back for a Mullins or any other major league that you trade and send him as part of a bigger package to the A's to get Miller or to get a starting pitcher. Again, it just shows you how many things that Elias can do at this deadline.
Right. No, and it doesn't take away from your system that you've
No,
built. You're just taking another guy and, hey, like, hope you enjoyed Baltimore for 24 hours. That was kind of sick, right? Yeah, I really enjoy that. The third type of player that you pitch in this article kind of broke my brain. And it's tough because he's been good. And you pitched Chris Bassett, which would be an interdivisional trade. And it's also for a guy that, like, again, has been good. He's got a 3.4 as we're recording right now on Thursday, July 11th at 11:30 a.m. But he's also owed about $22 million this year. And I can't, it's hard for my peanut brain to compute the value of a guy that's owed 22. And I know that it's a 3.4, but it's not a comfortable 3.4. It's a lot like the Craig Kimbrell ninth inning, where Bassett, like it's a lot of pitches, it's a lot of volume, and then it ends up being a 3.4 at the end of the year or whenever you check in. Where did you kind of like put the value of a Bassett type? And there are going to be a lot of those guys that I think are available where they escalate in price, and the Blue Jays probably have to pay for some of that to get a better prospect return.
I was looking at the market. To me, it was just who's the most dependable starting pitcher that I know is going to take the ball every fifth day. And potentially in this case, you get him for next year too.
Yeah.
So I look at 16 months of Chris Bassett, where at least every fifth day, here's a guy that's going to pitch for you. And the results at some point, you just have to look at him and say, okay, this is who he is, because ever since 2021, it's a sub 4 ERA. And I think 2021, he threw 150 innings. The last 3 years, it's been 180, 200, and he's trending towards at least 180 again. I just look at all the injury volatility in the Orioles rotation, and that was where I landed on Bassett. There's other names, are the Rangers going to sell? And if they did, like, I love Evaldi in the Orioles rotation even more. I just don't think they're going to sell. So it's a matter of what's available when it comes to the starting pitching market. It's funny. I was texting with Elijah last night, and he's like, I love the read, but I don't agree with where you're at with like the moves that the Orioles would make here. And it became clear through texting him, oh, he wants some of those Orioles prospects for himself as a
He
White
wants,
Sox fan.
yeah, he wants Eric Fetty to be a Baltimore Oriole at the
That's
deadline.
ex- that's exactly the case he was making to me. And granted, that could absolutely be the answer, but do I believe in Eric Fetty more or Chris Bassett? Personally, I just think Chris Bassett is a better bet to not go the complete other direction. Where I look at Eric Fetty, he's pitching in a no stress situation
Yeah.
at all right now. You all of a sudden get traded and you go to the best team in baseball, tougher division. I could see that ending really badly. Whereas with Bassett, I think worst case scenario, he pitches to a 4-2 instead of a 3-4, but he's still going to give you innings. And for that team, I mean, I mentioned in the article, I said, Chris Bassett could give up 4 runs and pitch himself into a game because the Orioles offense is that good. So, what are your thoughts on Fetty or Bassett?
Dude, I was going to say, this is the sexy baseball conversation that everybody comes to the Just Baseball show for on a Friday morning. It's like, hey, choose your fighter, Eric Fetty or Chris Bassett. That's so not sexy. It's unbelievable.
That's this deadline, though, man.
That
That's
is
this
this
deadline.
deadline. Right. Like, aside from Crochet and Luis Robert, I don't even know if Luis Robert's going to go at this deadline. Like, it might just be choose your fighter of C plus options. And I feel like that's disparaging to Bassett and Fetty to call them C plus options, because I do think that, they're like the step below Jack Flaherty at this point.
Yeah,
Um, I probably lean Bassett because of the availability and the reliability that you're talking about. And the two things that I want from a starting pitcher are availability and reliability. And like, I know Fetty's been awesome this year, and I think that he's turned a corner and he's probably transformed as a human being from his time in the KBO, but you can't forget he was in the KBO last year. So like, that shows you that there was not big league success before that KBO stint. Bassett, since 21, big league success, big league success, big league success. So I lean Bassett. There are a lot of those guys that I think Baltimore could be in the market for. If they look for a cheaper option, like a Trevor Williams could make a lot of sense for Baltimore.
he's been
If they
hurt
have,
though,
he
you know.
has, yeah,
So
but it's not out for the year. But
I don't
I
think
think
so,
he'll be
but
there.
it's lingered for a while. Where it's getting to the point. I don't know if he gets dealt. There's like Kevin Gosman potentially being out there, but then you're betting on a bounce back. So again, that was and with Flaherty, I think Flaherty is probably like the highest impact starter that might get dealt. Like he's throwing the ball the best, but they did that last year. It's not they're gonna circle the wagons on Flaherty again. They literally made that trade last deadline. It didn't work. I think he's a better pitcher now, but yeah, there's just it's slim pickings to try to find exactly which starters are going to even be available and which ones are impact starters. I mean, Tyler Anderson is another one that's out there. So again, the more you actually name off the guys that are going to get traded, I think the better and better Chris Bassett actually looks.
Yeah. All right. Now choose your fighter, Chris Bassett or Tyler Anderson.
I'd say Bassett for sure.
I mean, Anderson's got a sub 3.
Yeah, but I've seen Anderson be bad more recently.
Yeah, fair.
So I guess that's where I'm at with it.
That's totally fair. Yeah. So, really, what you pitch is kind of reallocating time in the outfield, going to get a top flight reliever, and being creative on the starting pitcher market. And
Yeah.
I think that that is not going to deplete the system, and Baltimore can still be the freight train that they look to be for the next decade. Because man, they are in the best position that like I've seen in my baseball coverage life, where their window's open, and it's going to stay open for depending on how they treat Gunner and Adley when it comes to extensions. It could be open for another 8 9 years.
With new ownership to be able to pay to keep some of these guys. And I want to read off the end of this article to you here because what
Yeah,
I did is I talked about all the movable pieces that I mentioned throughout the article at the end. That were some of them were part of the trades, other ones I just mentioned in passing, but guys that the Orioles could trade and not feel it. So Judd Fabian, Juan Nunez, Cade Povich, Enrique Bradfield, Dylan Beavers, and Connor Norby were the prospects that I discussed throughout the article. Now, a lot of these guys are top 15 guys in the system, but they have depth to be able to deal any and all of them. And then movable MLB players, it was Mullins, Hayes, Stowers, if they wanted to, I think would have value,
yeah.
Mateo, Urias. They can move any and all of those guys for whatever piece is out there at this deadline and make themselves that much better. I think it's honestly just finding value on the market from anywhere. But that's where to me, Mason Miller was the guy that it would be worth spending that capital on. Maybe there's somebody else I'm not thinking of that they can make a trade for, but that's where I kind of landed on through all this.
He's kind of the gold standard when it comes to relievers with control and like closers with control like that. I think of the Giants slide. I don't think they listen on Camilo Doval, but I think Doval would be awesome, awesome in
Yeah,
Baltimore.
Helsley would have been great too, but
Yeah, but
they're winning, so
Cards are too good, and I think the Giants are too convinced that they're going to be good very soon.
they're too stubborn.
They're too stubborn. So we did get the final team in orange there, so we're good now.
Yeah,
Do
we
we have any
covered it.
Clemson to talk about? Cam Kenarella may go 1-1 next year. Yeah, this is fun. And the only one that I may push back on when I say prospects that are movable is Enrique Bradfield. Because he's so ridiculously dynamic, they could just see him as the center fielder of the future, but he's not like I don't think Bradfield is stopping you from Mason Miller. I think
Yeah.
he's stopping you from a Bassett. If it's like, hey, we want Enrique Bradfield for Bassett and we'll cover a lot of it, I think I tense up and say, like, no, how about we give you 3 guys instead of one really good guy? So
Yeah.
that's probably the only one.
I think Miller is the one guy that you would consider trading. There's the prospects that it really hurts the deal. I think Bassett is not the pitcher that you're going to do that for. But for Mason Miller, if you're looking at a chance to win a World Series, I think the combination I was going for there is Bassett improves the floor, Miller the ceiling,
Yeah.
and that's where I landed on.
Yeah. Couple more things before we say adios. One of my favorite things, and I know that you like it too, is the funny story in baseball. And funny meaning head scratcher or are we for real? Like, are you kidding me? A facepalm type story in Major League Baseball is very fun. And I think the facepalm story of the year at this point was Ron Washington saying that Nolan Shonowell struggles to get up for day games. It's like, are you serious, man? Like that's really tough to hear about a Major League Baseball player that they struggle to get up. But I saw one and then like one kind of feel good story. The facepalm story comes from Vinny Duber on X, who does good work at CHGO, covering the White Sox. Michael Kopech, who blew a save on Sunday in Miami, said he's been hesitant to lean into the Sox game plan for him, which has involved throwing more breaking balls. He leaned into it today, meaning Wednesday, and it produced an immaculate inning in the ninth. Quote from Kopech: "You could definitely say I needed that." Now, that blown save in Miami, 20 pitches, 18 four seam fastballs, two cutters. He reintroduces the breaking ball to his arsenal and he throws an immaculate inning. And he said that was a weight lifted off of his shoulders. No shit, man. Like, come on. So I ask you, like, simply, is that one of like the dumber things that you've heard in Major League Baseball? It's like it was a revelation that you should throw breaking balls to major league hitters.
Well, I think the funniest thing for me is that there was a backdrop of the story that I had listened to the Just Baseball show right before I saw the video of the immaculate inning, and I saw, Peter blaming the White Sox for Kopech deciding to throw nothing but fastballs, and you very strongly saying no, it's Kopech's fault. He's the
Whose
one who's
fault
thrown.
is it? Yeah, let me ask you that. Whose fault is it?
Clearly it's Kopech's, especially to get that immediate gratification of being proven right that it comes out like 24 hours later. Oh yeah, he wasn't listening. He was just assigned to rear back and throw fastballs himself. And maybe you should mix it up a little bit, even if you have 102. Kopech is one of the more fascinating names that it's probably going to get dealt at this deadline.
What's his
I,
value?
but what's his value? Like I think they probably honestly I think they staple him to Crochet and they just call it, and it's
Yeah.
just like the extra piece that the team that's just like grimacing about what they're gonna have to give up to get Crochet. It's like, well, we can get 102 in our bullpen at the same time. Let's do it. And they might look back and hate the trade in a couple years, but it is what it is. Actually, a random story, if I could actually go to it, because I don't know if you guys will cover it. We did a story today on revisiting the Josh Naylor trade. Have you looked back at that trade that got Josh Naylor to the Guardians?
Well,
Because it is a
The Naylor trade also involved Quantrill, is that right? And that
eh,
was Clevenger going from Cleveland to San Diego. You know, the
yes,
player to be named later was Matt
yep,
Waldron.
exactly. That's the reason I want to talk about it. It's just a crazy trade where the Guardians are far and away leading it, but the way Waldron's pitching, it's like the saving grace. And he was the player to be named later, like you said. So it's the saving grace of the trade. But man, that is a bad deal by Preller a couple years ago because he gave up Quantrill, who was great, while Clevenger wasn't for the first part of that deal. And now you have Naylor, who's an all-star.
An absurd amount of big leaguers in that deal. And that was the weird, like, 2020 trade deadline that was on August 31st instead of like August 1st. Naylor was
Yeah.
traded by San Diego to Cleveland with Joey Cantillo, who I love, and I'm going to actually watch tonight, throw in Indianapolis, Gabriel Arias, Austin Hedges, Owen Miller, and Cal Quantrill. Those all went from San Diego to Cleveland for Mike Clevenger, Greg Allen, and Matt Waldron. Like that's a crazy deal. And the fact that we could just pluck player to be named later being Waldron in that deal shows you that we need a hobby bad.
Yeah.
We got to get off baseball reference, man. That's tough.
Nope, can't quit it. Can't quit
Yeah.
it.
Another feel good story I saw was a fun battle out of absolutely nowhere. And both these guys, I mean, Brooks Lee's about a week in to his major league career. Drew Thorpe's about a month in to his major league career. They were roommates at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And Lee took Thorpe yard in Chicago on Wednesday. And I saw this quote from Brooks Lee. He said, "I'm hitting 333 off of him. So last time I checked, those are Hall of Fame numbers." I love the bragging rights thing, and I love guys that are the best of friends that are facing each other. Like I watched Bueller face Seager and Seager take Bueller deep, and it like obviously that sucks, but I mean it was crazy to see like that's bragging rights in a friendship. Like one guy taking the other yard. Brooks Lee has forever bragging rights on Drew Thorpe, and the thing is, those can be two of the better players in the American League Central in not too long, like 2, 3 years from now, it's like, oh, one of the stars of the White Sox and one of the stars of the Twins were roommates in college. I love that. Is there another example of those kind of bragging rights that you can pluck off the top of your head?
Honestly, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but what I was thinking about is I remember like in travel or in Little League or something where you would have one of your buddies on the other team and you get them out and like that feeling and how great it was. And that's on the smallest possible scale. To
Right.
then magnify that on you're playing Major League Baseball, biggest possible scale. It's just incredible that two guys who were friends growing up are even in the same game, much less competing against each other. And then the guy that hits the home run has the ultimate bragging rights through all the group texts and everything else after the game. So yeah, it's pretty awesome when that happens.
That's the thing where it's like Bueller Seeger facing off. Like they were friends because of their time in the big leagues, and they're both in like year 7 or year 8 of their big league career. Like Brooks Lee's a week in, and a week into his major league career, he has a homer against his college roommate from like 4 years ago. Like they went through COVID as roommates together, which is very funny to me. So I love it.
the
All
the
right,
child the childhood ones are always the best ones. Like when Steven Matz and Marcus Stroman become teammates, and then all the thought pieces come out of that high school baseball game where the two of them squared off, and
that is an all timer when it comes to just reading the articles about it. Long
yeah,
Island high school baseball, because they were facing kids that like were going to go work at Ernst and Young in 5 years.
yep, absolutely.
All right, little game to wrap here. Games of the weekend. Sure, you know the deal. I'm going to throw you the pitching matchup, and you're going to tell me who wins and max one sentence why. Okay, we're going to go rapid fire.
Okay.
Let's start on Friday, 6:40. It's lining up for Justin Robleski to get the ball for his second career start for the Dodgers. So it would be Robleski in Detroit against Tarek Skubal. I know who has the pitching matchup, but I know who the better offense is. Dodgers, Tigers, at Comerica, Robleski, Skubal. Who wins?
Scooble, has got to make his case to start in the All-Star game.
Yeah, true. All right. Friday at 6:50, Guardians at Rays, Carlos Carrasco and Taj Bradley. Who you got?
Taj Bradley.
He's been
I, cou- I think Cookie had a good start recently, so it's just you're bound to go the other way when it comes to Carrasco at this stage of his career.
Yeah. All right. It's been up and down for Garrett Cole since coming off the shelf, but 7:05 in Baltimore. Yankees O's to take us into the All Star break is awesome. Garrett Cole, Cade Povich. Game is in Baltimore. Is Cole winning this one?
Haven't the Yankees been struggling against lefties?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say the Orioles.
But Povich has been struggling against big league hitters, so I don't know where I lean. And
It's great. I can't believe I just picked Povich over Cole, but that's the state of the Yankees right now, where I just don't have faith in them.
welcome to July 2024. All right, Rangers Astros 8:10 tomorrow or tonight. Andrew Heaney gets the ball for the Rangers against Hunter Brown, who was so good until he allowed 12 hits in Minnesota last weekend.
I like the Rangers vibes right now, so give me the Rangers.
Okay. 9:38 in LA. Brian Wu, Tyler Anderson, Mariners Angels. You hate Tyler Anderson apparently.
I do, so I'd say Brian Wu. Yeah, for sure. Tyler Anderson sucks.
Understood. And then 10:15, the late game. Joe Ryan gets the ball in San Francisco against Kyle Harrison. I lean Ryan like very, very firmly. I think he may put together like the outing of the year in that ballpark.
Yeah, no, I'm with you for 100%. Don't trust that offense for sure.
Fair. Saturday, 4:05. Go back to Baltimore. Yankees, O's. Luis Heel, Grayson Rodriguez.
Oh, G-Rod.
That's a fun game, though.
That is a
Let me
fun
see.
game. That's a fun matchup.
Gavin Williams has looked interesting off the IL. 4:10 in Tampa. Gavin Williams and the Guardians against Zach Littell and the Rays.
I think the Rays are gonna get that one.
Okay. Yeah, I could see it. Especially like, I mean, Bradley beats Cookie. I'll go
Even
Cleveland.
up the series, rubber match Sunday. That's where I'm at.
I think this may be like the Gavin's back start. So give me the Guardians. 4:10 at Fenway. Seth Lugo against Cutter Crawford.
Is Lugo gonna start an All-Star game? I'm going, but I mean he's pitching. You said he's pitching on Saturday, so I
Pitching
don't
on
know about.
Saturday. He could probably throw an inning on Tuesday. I wonder how it times up because, like, if you throw on Sunday, you're not throwing in the All Star game.
No,
If you throw on Saturday, I feel like it's kind of a toss up.
especially if you're a guy like Seth Lugo, who I mean might be his only
Understood.
All-Star appearance in his career. I think he'd want to pitch in that game in some way, the way he's throwing the ball this year.
I
But
think
give
so.
me Lugo. Give me Lugo. He's been unbelievable.
Okay, fair. 4:10. This game might break my brain. It's in Milwaukee. Nats Brewers. Mitchell Parker against Dallas Keuchel. Dallas
I would.
Keuchel start against the Dodgers pissed me off so bad. I don't know if you watched any of it.
I did it, but I was when you said that this matchup, I was hoping that it was Keuchel that was going on. When you said it was going to break your brain, I'm like, yeah, it's got to be Keuchel, isn't it?
Dude,
Oh
he
man,
went 4 1/3 shutout, 5 walks, no Ks in LA against the Dodgers.
It shows you like you just I'd say just throw strikes, but he didn't even do that. It's just baseball, man. Sometimes they hit him right where people are. So crazy. I would not pick Dallas Keuchel in any game at this stage.
Boom. You're with me, man. Man after my heart. All right, Saturday at 7:15, Braves Padres in San Diego. Reynaldo Lopez against Matt Waldron.
That's a good matchup. That's
Yeah,
a
right?
sneaky good matchup. At some point, the wheels got to fall off on Lopez a little bit, right? Give me the pods.
Okay, right before the All-Star break. I feel like it's an
Yeah.
elder thing where he's good through the All-Star break and then after that he might taper off because he was a reliever for the last couple of years. But yeah, I'll take Atlanta just because I think Reynaldo Lopez is going to run through the tape into the break. Sunday, the Roku game, 11:35 a.m. Carlos Rodon against Dean Kramer in Baltimore.
Roku game.
The Roku game. It was previously the NB or the Peacock game. Now Roku took it over.
I had no idea there was a Roku game. I'm
Oh,
sorry. That give me the matchup again. I got lost at Roku game. I was like, we're doing that?
it is. Yeah, it's a Roku game. I think it started like 3 weeks ago with absolutely zero like press on it
Yeah.
whatsoever. It's like, oh shit, there's a game at 11:30. Why? What is Roku? But the gist is like same as Peacock, where it takes one of the team's play-by-play guys and pairs it with the other team's analyst. So you get like the mix of
Hmm.
the local booths. It's kind of fun. It is fun. Um, 11:35 a.m. Yankees O's Carlos Rodon, Dean Kramer.
Rodon's been pretty bad lately, hasn't he?
Very bad.
So yeah, I take the Orioles to win the series. So I'll say Kramer.
Okay. Sunday at 1:35 at Fenway. Brady Singer, Brian Bayo. Bayo just struck out everybody his last time out, but the pitch count ran up, and obviously he hasn't been good this year. Singer has been very good this year.
That's tough. Give him Bale. Why not?
Okay. I hear you. 1:40 on Sunday. Ryan Pepio and the Rays hosting Ben Lively and the Guardians.
Ben Lively's that dog,
He
man.
is that dog.
Give me Ben Lively. I don't know when that's gonna end, but man, he has been so much fun this year.
He's totally this year's Bryce Elder, man. All right, 1:40. Jose Quintana against Cal Quantrill. What say you?
Give me the Mets beating the Rockies bullpen. How about that?
Okay, yeah, good answer. 4:05 on Sunday afternoon. Blake Snell throws again against Chris Paddock and the Twins.
Snell was pretty good the last time.
Yeah,
Maybe
he was.
Snell's gonna find it. So I'll take the Giants there.
I watched his in-game conversation with NBC Sports Bay Area with like Dwayne Kuiper, Mike Krukow on Wednesday nights, and it was like one of the better bits of TV that I've seen. I mean, talking about San Francisco and talking about kind of like the trials of his season and what he's gone through, like it was very good TV. So if you're looking for something to watch, go watch Blake Snell. I saw it was put together on Twitter too, so I'll shoot that a retweet or something. But last game that we got to go over: Braves Padres 4:10 on Sunday. Chris Sale, Dylan Cease. I actually just realized that takes Sale out of contention to start the All Star game. So Skeens might start the All Star game for the National League. That's crazy. Sale and Cease, Braves Padres at 4:10. Who you got?
Chris Sale right now. But it doesn't surprise me at all. I think Chris Sale's the type of guy at this point in his career where is happy to be there to maybe, wave at the beginning of the game and not throw a pitch. And yeah, I think they should start Skeens, honestly. It's if you want to have a draw in the All-Star game, he is going to give you the biggest draw. It makes the most sense to me to go Skeens. It's just like I remember when Matt Harvey started the All-Star game in New York years back, but they should go Skeens. But as far as that game, yeah, give me Chris Sale.
Okay. I can totally get behind it. Fink, you are the man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, man, of course. Thanks for having me.
Every link you need is in the episode description, including that excellent article on the Orioles' 3 trade possibilities. Whole bunch of all-star stuff coming this weekend. But hope you guys all enjoy this weekend, this final regular season weekend of ball, and we will talk to you ahead of the Home Run Derby on Monday.